Jerisabal, Master of None, Hacksmith Interview Edition.
Hey guys.
If you're watching this right now, it's probably because you saw me on the Hacksmith channel. And if you want to see me shoot my Iron Man rocket launcher and actually have it fire straight and be able to hit stuff, subscribe to catch that video in the future. And other cool projects. Time for the interview. If you're watching this video, you obviously have an interest in flying like Iron Man, and he is the first person that's actually trying to legitimately do it. So to start off, what actually made you want to try to fly like Iron Man, and what made you think you could do it?
Well, one of my first major projects on YouTube was building a pneumatic exoskeleton, which you might remember.
Yeah.
Now, what you guys might not know is Robert Downey Jr. himself actually shared my project on Facebook last year, and he left the comment, "Make a flying version, and I'm sold." So basically, I took that as a challenge from Robert Downey Jr. to try and fly like Iron Man in real life, and hopefully, if I succeed, might be able to get to meet him.
That would be cool. So you obviously have decided on using EDF technology to try to fly like Iron Man. What made you decide to use this instead of other options that are out there, which we'll get to later?
Yeah. So in the beginning of our Iron Man flight project, we attempted to use solid rocket fuel. So basically the biggest small rockets you could buy without a license. And what we found is that's very dangerous, very unsafe, and really it would have resulted in a more of a rocket jump or a rocket boost than any kind of sustained flight, because you're not going to be able to control the thrust in any way, shape, or form to actually be able to hover. And that's the main goal of this project, to be able to hover like Iron Man and then fly around. But the main point is get to that hovering point and then see about flying really fast and whatnot.
And I can actually vouch for him on the rocket motors. I've played with Aerotech motors. They're extremely hard to ignite. At the same time, if they don't misfire, those are difficult.
Right, so we could have done it much easier using just regular electric brushless motors with big rotors. So basically building a giant quadcopter. The problem is we did the math and the vehicle would be about 2 meters in diameter.
So that's not really flying like Iron Man.
Like Iron Man at all. So we decided to look into EDFs because they're much smaller and they can put out a lot of thrust. And the problem is they're still not that efficient. You see, efficiency goes up with size. So if we had an EDF, even maybe a foot across, that would probably have enough thrust to lift me.
Right.
But because it's this small, it's only a little bit. And you kind of have a catch-22 because you need these small, you need more power, which means you need more batteries. When you have more batteries, you need more EDFs. And it just kind of layers on top of each other. So using these small EDFs, which produce about 8 kilograms of thrust each, you'd think, oh, you probably only need about 10 to fly, like 80 kilograms. That's about the weight of an average person. Well, you're forgetting about the weight of the EDF, the weight of the stuff that's holding it together, the batteries, the speed controller.
And that's heavy.
All in all, that adds up.
Substantial.
So our preliminary calculations say if we were to stick with this size of EDF, we'd probably need about 20 of them just to overcome all the battery weight and actually be able to have a payload or enough thrust to actually be able to lift me. So what we're hoping to do is use slightly larger EDFs, but the problem is there aren't that many available. The biggest we've found is available from a company in France, and they sell for about 4,000 euros each. So that's about 6 or 7 grand US, which is for one. And we'd still probably need 4 to 6 of those. So it's not really feasible unless we get a really big sponsor to be able to pay for those. So in the meantime, we're going to test all the subsystems using smaller EDFs and basically learn our lessons and try and flush out the design before we either spend a lot of money to try and finish it and make sure we actually think it's going to work. Because otherwise, that's a lot of money to spend on a project that really you're not too sure if it's going to succeed.
Right.
So the big difference between EDFs and, say, a plain rotor or prop design you'd see on a quadcopter is the duct actually increases the potential thrust output. So if you had, this is a 120 millimeter prop in an EDF compared to just 120 mil prop, this is going to be more powerful. But as you scale either of them, the thrust goes up quite a bit. So if we get a larger EDF, we'd be able to put out a lot more thrust.
I see. That makes sense. So why haven't you gone with actual fuel-powered jet engines?
So the reason we haven't used hobby jet engines is also mostly cost. So if you want to get a decent one that can put out around 50 pounds of thrust, you're still looking at about $3,000 to $4,000 US.
There's one thing we forgot to talk about, so I figured I'd show you in a little illustration. Let's say that you've got enough money to go out and buy a bunch of jet engines and strap them to your body so that you can go fly like Iron Man. Well, there's one problem that you have to deal with first, and that's when you fire these things up, you're going to have to figure out some way to insulate yourself so that you don't get burned to a crisp from the super hot jet exhaust that's coming out of these things. Now, if you figure that out and you're flying around like Iron Man, there's one major problem. How do you think you're going to stop once you get moving with these jet engines? And you're probably thinking, well, I'm going to do just like Iron Man does, and I'm going to move my arms and legs so that the thrust is pointing in the opposite direction so that I stop. Well, have fun trying that. It's not going to work. And this is why. As soon as you flip those engines around the opposite direction, all the air that was going into the front of the motors is now going into the back of the motors. And this matters a lot. And to show you why it matters, you have to know how a jet engine works. So with a jet engine, you have the air coming in the front, right? And it goes out the back. And when that air comes in the front, you put in an equivalent amount of fuel. It's called a stoichiometric ratio. And then it combusts inside, and that's what gives you thrust and makes the air come out the back faster. Now, as soon as you reverse that airflow on the motor, all of a sudden, to try to slow down, you take all of that air that was coming in and you reduce it to a very small amount, but you still have a lot of fuel coming into the jet engine. So what happens? The fire goes out. And if the fire goes out, you don't have any thrust. And if you don't have any thrust, you can't fly. So then you're dead because you fall out of the sky because all your motors shut off. So if you want to try to fly like Iron Man, don't use jet engines. And if you don't use jet engines to try to fly like Iron Man, that means you're going to get to stay alive and you can continue to watch our YouTube videos. All right, back to the interview. All right, so obviously, James, you have a lot of fantastic tools like the CNC machine and this Bridgeport machine and 3D printers. What else do you plan on getting in the future? And does this in any way affect like how you decide to do projects or what projects you're considering for the future?
We're continually trying to upgrade all the tools and equipment we have here to allow us to really be able to make whatever we want in-house. If we come up with a project where there's something we can't make, we just outsource it to another machine shop. But ideally down the road, we'd like to be able to do everything right here in-house, because sometimes when you're working hard on a project and you need that part yesterday, the only way you're going to get it for a reasonable cost is if you do it yourself. Because most companies, you want a part, okay, you're going to be waiting, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks for it.
Or you pay to make up for the time difference.
Especially if you're looking for one-off, which is most of the time what we're doing. So ideally, by bringing all this equipment here, we'll be able to speed up the prototyping process for all of our projects.
Do you have any insight as to what projects you might be doing in the future that you want to let us know about?
We have quite a few projects upcoming that I'm pretty excited about. One of the coolest ones is revisiting the Batman grappling hook. So that means both a launcher and an ascension device. And we want to... It's been done before, but it's never been done well. And we want to do a really good one that can really like take you up really fast and be able to scale pretty much whatever you want.
I'd pay for that.
Yeah.
Well, cool, James. It was awesome getting to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hope your channel continues to grow. And mine also. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more awesome stuff. And hopefully we get to work together on more stuff in the future.
Sounds good.
See ya.
Back from the dead.